Oh,
A very good morning to all our dear listeners and viewers. You're welcome to our weekly talk show, ACFIM Talks. Yes, we are always talking what's up and about that is affecting Ugandans. Today, I'm joined by two distinguished guests that I'm going to be introducing. But before we start, I'm inviting everybody to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It should be flashed on the screen, and also follow us on all our accounts of the Facebook Live and also Twitter. Our Twitter is at ACFIMUG and YouTube is ACFIM Uganda, and also we are on Facebook Live ACFIM to be part of this conversation. I need to get this discussion started. We are discussing where did the COVID money go, part two. Remember last week we began this discussion, which we didn't exhaust. I had Honorable Gerard Karuhanga introduce the precepts of possibly where could this money have ended up. And until then, there have been a number of developments. The first important development I should point out that fits into this discussion is that government again has borrowed another loan of 1 billion US dollars, which is a tune of about 3.5 trillion Uganda shillings from the International Monetary Fund. It's a 36-month loan arrangement under the extended credit facility. Again, it's meant to support the post-COVID recovery and increase households' incomes and also see through the inclusive growth by fostering the private sector development. So we have another loan that has come through. And when I was reading the where did the COVID money go by ISER, ISER is Initiative for Social and Economic Rights. It also share interesting findings of how much money, about 3 trillion that we received from the different development partners, was used in the first lockdown. But before we get this discussion started, allow me to welcome two distinguished guests. I have Honorable Anna Ebaju Adeke. She's no stranger to most of you. She has had quite a very illustrious political life. She served as the president for Makerere University as guild president between 2013 and 2014. She then went on to represent the National Female Youth Council in the 10th Parliament, and now, as we speak, she's the MP, woman MP for Soroti district. Honorable, you are most welcome. And Kongs, because when she was swearing in, she was equally being accorded a master's in law. You're most
thank you
welcome,
very
Honorable.
much.
Yeah, it's good to have you again.
Thank you for having me. That designation for women representatives
Yes.
is stated as district woman representative under the constitution.
Oh,
So
thank
this
you.
whole woman MP. I think we should
Okay.
normalize saying it the way it should be.
Thank you so much for that
So
clarity.
thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for having me here. Viewers, I greet you all.
It's great. It's good. Now, the other guest that I have is a lawyer and an economist, Mushime Moses. Mushime, been looking at your profile. Looks like you have another. Should I say congratulations? I'm seeing somewhere executive director, Open Health Network. I think the Congress are in order as well.
Thank you.
Yes, but she was in. Moses was in charge of the study which ISER did roll out. Where did COVID money go? Looking at the international finance institutions funding to Uganda, then working at ISER as which is Initiative for Social and Economic Rights. And was in charge of the economic inclusion and fiscal policy. I don't know whether you're also still a partner with Chibuka Rashid and Company Advocates, but he has also worked with the Infectious Disease Institute. So he is an economist and is a lawyer with also M&E background. You are most welcome, Moses.
Thank you. Good morning, viewers and countrymen and women.
Okay, let me start with Anna because Anna kind of like hinted that he doesn't have the entire 1 hour with us. So I want to first arrest her when I still have her and make use of her very well. Anna,
Yes.
good, you can hear me. There is, we are in the second lockdown, but there are unanswered questions around the first lockdown concerning how money that was allocated towards COVID response and fight was handled. I'm sure you are part of the parliament, the 10th parliament, that did appropriate and approve the supplementary budget, which was about then 4.36 trillion, which is about which was raised from supplementary budget. I think took about 27 billion. Contingency fund had about 11.6 billion, and then there was money which came through
Origami.
cash and donations. So cumulatively, we had about 4.36 trillion collected, all appropriated for COVID response during the first lockdown phase. The Auditor General has since then released a very disturbing report of how part of this money was abused grossly through procurements, especially pointing out a number of ministries that wrongly used this money. That is just a smoking gun, but as a person who was part of the parliament, could you have a clue, because the number of theories advanced, where possibly this money ended up? How was this money
Okay.
used?
So thank you very much for having me. Okay, so I was part of the 10th Parliament that approved the supplementary budget of about 248 billion, the borrowing from the IMF. Still, Uganda received about 360 million USD to help our economy recover. So all these I was a part of. And some of the critical questions that we raised was the legislative framework that was facilitating government to do this. First, we as members in the opposition initially suggested that the government, the Attorney General, would table a certain legislative framework to govern the COVID pandemic under the Public Health Act, which was not done. Secondly, we had queries about the government departments, how they were instituting the institutions which were going to be in charge, of the implementation of the activities for which they were getting the money, borrowing the money, and seeking Parliament's approval. And still, okay, they said they would handle it with the ministries and the government departments. So some of us opposed it. But of course, it was very difficult now, for instance, in the budget committee to totally deny government to get this money. So we were, because the country was struggling.
Yes.
The country was struggling and people were badly off. So government got this money. I know there was actually a minority report, I think, because there was a misallocation to Parliament. Many people know what Parliament did. It was so shameless. So we tried our part. And now what we are doing is trying to pick up the pieces as Parliament and query the utilization of the funds, because we didn't see what it actually did. We are back to the second phase of the lockdown. The second wave has hit us, and we're struggling with the same things we were trying to solve by doing all these borrowings and supplementary budgets and expenses. So we find ourselves back to square one. There is no infrastructure to handle the COVID patients. There is no clear plan. There are no clear institutions. Now we're in the second phase of the lockdown, and it is no longer President Museveni in charge. It's now the Prime Minister and the group she has set up. The Prime Minister is doing things herself, delivering nets herself. So it's a bit shocking to think that this was not reasonably foreseeable, because the health experts warned us that there would be a second phase. So actually right now, as we speak, I'm in Parliament, going to attend a meeting a committee meeting because I'm on the task force that was set up to query the utilization of funds from the first wave of COVID-19. So we're at Parliament for the same purpose and going to meet all those ministries, Ministry of Finance, Health, Office of the Prime Minister, to inquire into the utilization of these funds plus the donations that government received.
Okay, thank you, Anna. You raised something interesting, which is concerning the legislative framework, which was missing. And I think partly the ISER report alludes to some of the gaps that led to potential abuse of this COVID-19.
Yes.
And I'm going to come to Moses to elaborate that. But before Moses, you jump in here, Honorable, help me understand here, because so far the audit report, I think towards the end of last year did hint on abuse of money with the preliminary report. I think then we were sitting in the 10th Parliament. If I'm not mistaken, at that time, I think what was queried was about 200 billion abused. I think it was about 311 billion abused by the MDAs. Then later on, fast forward, the June audit report for 2021, 2019, 2020 by the Office of the Auditor General then brings out a figure to 143 billion. And the culpable ministries to that effect that have been faulted for probably not having followed procurements. And again, the issue of procurement is reflected in the report by ISER, which Moses will talk about, have been Ministry of Health, Ministry of Defense, Uganda Police, Uganda Prison Service, Office of the President, among others, including local governments. There is a smoking gun. So what is the way forward? Because if the Auditor General is pointing to us probably the institutions that were culpable, should we expect some action from government, Anna?
No, I don't think so, honestly speaking, because we advised the Attorney General and told him we are dealing with a pandemic, we are going into an election, you need to have a legislative framework to govern. We need the law to be amended. And he refused. He said we would use the Public Health Act as it was. So he refused. They refused to declare a state of emergency. And anyway, we all know the undertones, the political undertones around this. So, they refused to set up a structure, a properly legislated structure to amend the laws to facilitate really the handling of this pandemic. So they decided to go under the regulations that were under the Public Health Act, had regulations enacted, which they used. So now we find ourselves in a pretty difficult position. And I really don't think government has the willingness to set up a structure, an infrastructure that can handle this, because I think that the priorities of the main players on government side are not really, I'm sorry to judge, but they are not really to ensure that they safeguard the livelihoods and lives of many Ugandans. Many people saw COVID as an opportunity to get wealthy in a day. The fraudulent procurements that were undertaken with extreme inflation of prices and non-delivery of items allegedly procured. How all the procurement guidelines were flouted, the selection of companies, all that. So I think many again see an opportunity now, Therefore, I really don't think government is interested in establishing a framework that is going to help us not only manage COVID as a pandemic, but even in the future, because with the ever evolving environments and science and all these things, many other pandemics may come. The same way that SARS-CoV came. So I really don't think that there's that willingness, that goodwill to have this structured and done in an organized way. during the first phase, we saw the president literally address us on everything. Even the amount of posho we could put on our table was from a presidential address. We saw him micromanage everything. Yes. So I think this is what they prefer. They prefer to micromanage it. That's why they will not set up an infrastructure or legislation to ensure that this is properly managed, that the right institutions do it and they are properly held to account in the event that they fail. So I think this is really how the NRM has run, having informal structures and dealing with them. Because you frankly cannot, as a president, be handling everything. Put the prime minister in charge, and together with just a few members, they are able to decide that, okay, now Ugandans will receive relief. And these are the classes of Ugandans without consultation with leaders. You know, they're really out of touch. But again, they thrive on the non-existence of systems.
Wow, interesting. I'm going to throw in here, Moses, and I hope I will still be having Anna for quite another couple of minutes, because there's a question that I want you to answer concerning people think that this money, probably looking at the timing of COVID and the politics at play, we were in the middle of an election campaign season. Probably part of that money ended up in financing elections. There's that theory, you'll help us debunk that theory, but also there's a theory that probably that money ended up because we saw very many bungalows, apartments, commercial properties shoot up during that period of time. Probably that money ended up in that area. And I'll come back to you on that one, but let me now come to Moses. Moses, your report is quite interesting. And what Anna is saying is partly captured in this report, because you highlight how in the assessment of some of the projects that were, first of all, your report only looked at money that came from the international financial institutions, which is about 3 trillion Uganda shillings, an equivalent of $868 million, if I'm right. But you touch interesting things on how some of the money, because the study was trying to understand whether the money did reach the intended beneficiaries, did its purpose as it was, why it was accessed for and borrowed for. So, and then you come up, you share with us in the report how a number of things that touch the legal framework, the institutional framework not being sufficient to safeguard or prevent misuse, which Anna's just talked about, and some of the things concerning how our procurements guidelines were not adhered to. My first question to you, what informed or motivated you to come up with such a study as ISER?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and once again, good morning, viewers. You will know that COVID has exacerbated corruption in Uganda, but not just in Uganda. When you look at the entire Africa, governments are not being accountable. But also we've seen, hello, can you hear me?
The network is a bit erratic. I don't know.
Sorry.
I hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes, I do.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes,
proceed.
I was saying that what led us to undertake this research was prevalent situations that showed that government is not accountable. And also people are demanding, more than ever, people are demanding for accountability on how government is managing COVID funds. You could see it all over social media. But particularly we are interested in multilateral financial institutions, such as the IMF, the World Bank, and the African Development Bank, because these are institutions whose mandate is more or less to ensure that there is elimination of poverty, to ensure that there is inclusiveness, but also to ensure that there is good governance in this country. So we were very interested to see how the money that they gave to government was spent but also to see the safeguards they put in place. One, to ensure that there is transparency and accountability, but also to ensure that citizens are part and parcel of this process. And like you said, our research points to the contrary. I will just give you an example. Let's talk about IMF. IMF gave the highest amount of money. That was around 481.5 million US dollars, which is close to 1.7 trillion in Uganda shillings. But what did this money do in terms of addressing the impact of COVID in terms of health, but also in terms of the socio-economic effects that were resulting from COVID? There was a lockdown. We saw about 2.5 million people lose jobs by June last year. And now it has repeated, given that we are in second lockdown. We saw that maternal mortality and neonatal mortality were increasing because people could not access healthy facilities. We saw people not going to school, but also we saw the uptake of healthy services generally declining. So we are very interested. So for example, what did the IMF money do? Part of the money went to stock reserves, and that was Bank of Uganda. Money went to Bank of Uganda to stock reserves. That was by June last year. But the report released by Bank of Uganda showed that by June last year, Bank of Uganda had enough reserves to take us for 5.2 months. And our optimal target is just 4 months. So why would Bank of Uganda, for example, stock reserves at the expense of people suffering, people out of employment, people not affording to get what to eat? Now, we looked at different financing agreements between IMF and our neighbors. Let's talk about Kenya and Rwanda. The precondition to stock 70% of the loan they gave us in form of foreign reserves was not there in those agreements. So was it an issue of failing to negotiate in the agreement, or was it an issue? Was it an issue of putting a buffer of money just for people to misuse the money? I'm not imputing that because that was not our finding, but that is an inefficiency on part of government, one in failing to negotiate the agreement, but also how this money was spent. Now, the other part, and this one, went to Uganda Development Bank.
Yes.
Now, there was a stance by government that they wanted to give economic stimulus package to help businesses that were affected by COVID-19. But I can tell you, and this UDB put it out in a press statement. They said the subsidiary agreement they had with Ministry of Finance was not to support struggling businesses. It was to give that money to businesses operating in the private sector, rather in priority sectors, that is agro-industrialization, that is manufacturing, and that money was not meant for stimulus packages. And there is this jargon of SMEs. I can tell you that UDB does not deal with small and medium enterprises. It deals with connected companies that are going concerns, and it is a struggle to get the money. It is just an elite bank that is in Kampala. So that is how IMF loan was spent. Did it go down to a common person? No.
So first pause there. So what was the financing agreement between IMF, because that was IMF money, it's a loan.
Exactly.
Between government and IMF to that effect of the stimulus package? Because as I read here, I remember that was also in the budget speech. One of the key factors, I think it was the theme for the budget, stimulating the economy to safeguard livelihoods, jobs, businesses, and industrial recovery. So what was the financing agreement? And at what point does now government veer off the financing agreement between IMF and have a different agreement with UDB that managed that facility?
Exactly. I will tell you that IMF also now accepts that possibly the government did not hold up to the promises it made. We know that, part of that money, of course, like I said, went to Bank of Uganda to stock reserve. But the other component came in the form of budget support. And the government, when you look at the appraisal report from IMF, government said they are going to provide economic stimulus package to struggling businesses. That was, so it was up to government to live up to that promise and that policy commitment, which they did not do. And that's where the problem is. So we are now, here we are in the second, IMF is going to advance another $1 billion US. That is close to 3.5 trillion. Are we going to continue the same? Are we engaging relevant stakeholders, including SMEs that are struggling? How is government going to support them? Are we still going to use UDB as a vehicle for these businesses? Because that promise is still there. And I shudder when I look at now the disciples, people from these respective ministries, saying that government offered a stimulus package. A stimulus package is supposed to be timely. It's supposed to go to businesses that are in need and are willing to spend. That did not happen. We would want to see government coming out and offering a stimulus package that works for struggling businesses, but also works for the informal sector that is employing about 85% of working Ugandans. But if you permit me, I could go even to the World Bank. World Bank also supported the country in various ways. For example, when the pandemic set in, the first support that World Bank gave to the country was 15 million, which was triggered from an existing project on maternal and child and reproductive health, which is being implemented by Ministry of Finance. What that meant was that there was a financial gap created in the existing project where women rely to access critical services. And that points to how Ministry of Health prioritizes. Now, before that trigger, there was also another trigger of almost the same amount. Actually, I think for it was about $5 million that went to support Ebola prevention measures. So you find an existing project that is supporting mothers who rely on public hospitals and facilities to access critical services. There is a gap and they cannot access these services. And of course, because we are in elections, government said it would borrow again to recover the money. It takes parliament almost a year. Because for it almost a year to put back this money. So you wonder what happened for the last year when we were in elections. Was the government business going on? Was government up to the task, or it was just interested in elections? Was it up to the task to support the COVID prevention plan that was ably laid out by the same government, or were preoccupied by elections? And this is where we are. We are in a second lockdown. We know that, for example, we don't have enough ICU beds. We don't have enough clinical capacity to handle these surging cases. And we have financial institutions that also put in money. Then we have another loan that came from World Bank, and this was going to education to support the continuous learning of students and other learners in primary and secondary during the COVID. Initially, and this was around 14.7 million US dollars. Initially, there was an arrangement that, first of all, there will be a curriculum that will support long distance. Materials will be printed. Teachers will be reached out to support them, continue supporting the students. We shall see government also supporting schools for safe reopening. But I can tell you, out of the 14 million students and learners that had been targeted, the project only managed to cover around 3.1 million learners. We could look at the medium with which the long distance learning was given to students. We used the radios, we used TVs, we used online channels that are supported by internet. But the majority of families in rural areas do not have access to all of these. So these are projects that exacerbated exclusion.
Okay. Yes, first pause it there a bit. I'm going to come back to this. A very interesting thing concerning the urban cash program, which partly that money was also borrowed for, and now under the second lockdown, it's about over 50 billion, close to I think 59 billion, which has been allocated to give cash to the vulnerable. And there's something interesting which I need to discuss. But let me first come to Honorable. Honorable, I'm a bit concerned here because you see, first of all, there are concerns that our debt we are almost getting into having a very unsustainable debt. Where is the power of Parliament to control the overzealous appetite of borrowing exercised by the executive? Because they come to you to approve borrowing. But when you look at the monies, first of all, there's an issue of borrowing and the money is put to good use. But there's also the issue of now borrowing, money is not put to good use, but the debt burden and the sustainability of that debt starts to become a concern to Ugandans. What is the role of Parliament in this? And because I want you to discuss this concerning looking at also now the new loan of 3.5 trillion that has been phased throughout the 36 months. Have I lost Honorable? I think I've lost Honorable.
Yeah, I think you've lost
I
her.
hope Honorable comes back because yes, he's getting back on stage. Because there is always that question. Where is Parliament? Why are we in a situation where Parliament has control over?
Okay, thank you. So you know that Parliament is a democracy, and you know democracy is really about numbers, right? So some of the challenges that we face in Parliament is that we have numbers, and the party that is privileged to have the numbers misuses them, because all that they use these numbers to do is to vote and vote for all these things to pass. So no matter how many minority reports and minority opinions we may hold, we are still minority. That's the challenge. And it's very difficult to reason with. I must say, my colleagues in the NRM may appeal to reason. I mean, if they attended this show and understood, they live in this country. They know the plight of Ugandans. They know how burdensome this national debt is becoming for the country. However, because what we do in Uganda, what NRM does is patronage politics. So they always fear, the repercussion of not supporting government initiatives like that. However, our position as Parliament, of course, when government wants to borrow, they have to do it without permission as Parliament. And many times when the loans are tabled on the floor, we always hit it off. It's especially us in the opposition. We hit it off with government. We hit off at such a wrong start because, number one, the economist here will tell you that most of the loans that we take, we just end up servicing the debt. Sometimes it's not even used. Sometimes the money is not used. So we keep wondering, why do we keep borrowing yet we cannot use the money? And we are servicing debt and not even paying the principal. Yes, and yet the money is not being utilized. And then second of all, and worst of all, is the misappropriation of it, stealing the money that is borrowed. And I'll say this, I'll put it really as blunt as it is, stealing, not even misappropriation, because there is actual theft of this money, and it's very gross. But it's done in the ministry departments, it's done with the procurement, it's done in the executive, and really that is outside the hands of Parliament. Yes, the Auditor General report is before us. I've already told you I'm in a select committee that is going to be investigating the utilization of the funds. We shall produce a report. It will be tabled and debated in Parliament. The recommendations are there, but the implementation can't be done by Parliament. So even if we recommend that individuals should refund the money, if there is no will from the executive to actually implement those recommendations, then they are just on paper. Yeah, they are just as useless as the papers and the ink that they exist on. So it's something that I think there is no serious goodwill to fight and to eliminate the misappropriation of money borrowed.
Okay.
You spoke just one thing about the money about the elections issue that you had hinted on. Some of the fears that we in the opposition raised at the time when NRM was getting this money close to the election, and the SOPs were in place, they were governing the mode of how we're going to carry out the elections. Some of the questions that we raised and our concerns were that NRM would actually use this money to fund their elections. And I really would like to say that they did. They really did. Because the most facilitated candidate, NRM, I think, was giving each member of parliament candidate of theirs about 60 million.
How much?
About 60 million throughout the
60
country.
million.
Yes. So I don't know which business arm NRM has that it would get that money from. Maybe someone here would tell me. Yes. Because we have over 530 constituencies. You multiply that by 60 million. Where does that money come from? Yeah. Yeah, we all know that NRM is fused with the state. It's actually the state. It's fused with government. And it is so gross because that is how they've mismanaged public funds. Public funds end up becoming NRM funds. Even the way that they give relief is so selective. So it's also problematic.
Okay. So there is a possibility, a strong likelihood that part of that money ended up in financing politics.
Yeah, I don't know because and someone should tell us the source of such money. If you have the capacity to give 60 million to every flag bearer all over the country, where does that money come from? What's the business arm of the NRM? Who are its donors? Yes.
Interesting question. Thank you for that smoking gun. Many of us have that smoking. We seem to have connect the dots between, first of all, the timing of COVID presenting an opportunity, the timing, the political environment, and the loopholes that were exploited. Remember, Auditor General's report points to procurement as an area where most anomalies happen. And already Uganda has been doing badly in losing resources via procurements. But now there's also this other theory which I want us to help debunk, the theory of possible that even those who didn't steal money to invest in politics, there are those who stole money probably to invest in their commercial businesses, because around that time there was an unprecedented increase in structures that came up, commercial structures that were constructed, and people are asking themselves, where did this money come from? Can we connect this money to COVID money?
Well, I wish I could connect those dots, but it's really rumors. The one I told you about, the NRMs, is because I have evidence. I was a candidate in the last election, and I knew exactly when the money came. And but the one about individuals that store money and are privately investing, I may not have direct evidence for that. However, yes, I have heard, I've read it on social media, how some hostels came up during the pandemic when everyone was down, how apartments came up. I think it really, our concern should be the removing of public money by individuals and using it for anything other than the purpose for which it was taken. Because if your company has been given the contract to procure oxygen gas cylinders, we don't care if you have done what with the money. We just want the oxygen gas cylinders.
Yes.
That is our concern. So we are now in the second wave of the pandemic. People are paying for oxygen. It is very dehumanizing. They are fighting for oxygen. I saw a video of people fighting for a cylinder, for an oxygen cylinder. And in this free market economy, everything is driven by demand and supply. So the cost of healthcare has gone so high because the demand on private facilities is high, because government refused to equip our public facilities. Whoever took the contract to equip the ICU units of public hospitals, tell us, where did you put that money? because the budget was for 42,000 beds. Why did you only bring 13,000? Where did you put the money for the remaining thousands of beds? Because now in Soroti Regional Referral Hospital, women, COVID patients are lying on verandas. There is no space. People have to travel kilometers just to get oxygen. So I think that our preoccupation should not be if they are wealthy or anything. It should be if the money has done the purpose for which it was borrowed. And that's our concern. But the problem is that the reputation that government has built over that time in 35 years of power has been tolerance to corruption.
Okay,
It's been tolerance to, it encourages it to grow. Yes, for example, you saw what the Gavi funds incident is not lost on us. But just a few days ago, the minister was telling us about a company that is going to be installing. I don't know which procurement process was taken on to select this company. Yes, I mean, I'm not sure about it. So I think that as long as we continue to, empower individuals that have hurt the country by stealing from it, it becomes very difficult. And the example that is set is very bad. Because the moment the executive starts to say, okay, now we have to recover COVID-19 money, then all the COVID-19 misappropriators are going to point at the executive and say, oh, why didn't you recover all these other monies that have been stolen before? And yet there was evidence, glaring evidence that money had been stolen. So it becomes very difficult, and I hardly doubt. We shall do our work as parliament, but I hardly doubt that the executive is going to take it on to make sure that this money is refunded or that they face the law.
Wow, interesting. I'm going to come back to you on the issue of the new disbursement, the allocation of 373 billion towards COVID, of which the Ministry of Health is taking the biggest share of 206 billion, and then the other is shared between security, mainly security and local governments, because there's an issue there on concerning the prioritization on how do we prioritize when we are allocating money, especially concerning the most demanding needs in the current situation of COVID we are in.
I don't understand why security has to always take a large share. Because I meant to believe that even in the last one, I think over about 2 billion or 20 billion, something like that, was put in the Wazalendo Sacco at Post Bank from COVID money. So really, I don't understand how justifiable this is.
And yet there are reports, you will help me confirm that the additional reserve force, the LDUs, I think are still not yet paid.
Yes, they are not yet paid.
And yet money is allocated to security. So we are trying to understand exactly where did the COVID money go. And we are trying to connect the dots here. But let me come to Moses. Moses, in your report, you talk about how there was failure to the issue of urban cash for work programs that was not implemented. Money was borrowed for that purpose, and there was a program targeting over 529,000 people in 16 urban centers. They were supposed to benefit working 12 days a month for 2 months, and every day one earning about $1.5, which is about 6,500. Despite this good initiative, the urban cash for work activities never started, according to your report. So now, what happened? Where did this money go? Because again, this was part of COVID money. What exactly happened? What did we sign up for, and why did this come through?
Exactly. This points to the inefficiency within government. This money came as a loan from World Bank. It was given. It is there. So either there is inefficiency in terms of how fast government can support its ordinary citizens, or this money is lying idle somewhere, or it was diverted. So those are three possibilities. But the one I will go with is inefficiency. In addition to that, also the International Labour Organization supported. They said we can give you money and you pilot this project. Even in flood-affected cities or communities, nothing has taken place. And here we are, Ministry of Gender is telling us that this time around, within 7 days, people will start receiving cash. Now,
so is this allocation for the 60, I think is this 69 billion for the vulnerable? Is it different from this? The urban?
yes, this was supposed to be conditional cash transfer. People will work on urban public works like roads, like trenches, like footpath. And when they work, they will be paid cash after they have worked. By this time around, because we are in a lockdown, now government is shifting, but now this was not implemented. That is first of all, the first point. Second point, now government is shifting now to give unconditional cash to those who are vulnerable. But when you look at the criteria and the clustering of those who are vulnerable, you shudder. It is largely exclusive. People in rural areas whom they assume that they are doing well, they are doing badly. The urban population is just 26% of our total population. When you look at the how poverty is segmented, 20.3% of our people live below less than $1. But where is this poverty? This poverty is in Kalamoja. This poverty is in Bukede. This poverty is not in Kampala. But now we are saying there is a lockdown. A lockdown affects everyone because it affects the lifeline of doing business, lifeline of how people get food, how people get medical care, energy. So you cannot only look at those people who are in urban centers. And you are even in urban centers, we are not looking at all the people. So it is very important. And let me tell you, it is about political will. Government can get money. Government can get money because you are borrowing. Let's say, for example, we are getting $1 billion from IMF. That money is enough to take care of 2 million households, for example. Every household getting even 320,000 shillings. That money is enough. But somewhere, some government is not interested in helping the people. Government had decided to lock out LC1 system for reasons that are best known to government. And now we are saying that it is only town clerks that are going to, and the town clerks have assured the government that they have this data on those who are vulnerable. That one I doubt. So it is going to be an elite kind of engagement. LC1s are out, municipal and city councillors are out. Now we are opting for VHTs. VHTs, where we know that Ministry of Health has a funding gap of 30 billion to support the village health teams program. So now, because for some reasons, maybe because now we are targeting urban and municipal, rather city and municipal, where we know that there is a lot of people who are conscious. Now we say LC1 system is not going to be part of this arrangement. What a joke. Huh? So it is very important that we know right from the word go that even now the COVID fund that is set to support vulnerable people, it is not inclusive. There is not only a person who has been consulted. Cabinet went and sat and they said, these are vulnerable. The artists, the DJs, without talking about the common person, a woman who has no housing, who has no food, who is in a rural community. And that is very absurd. And it is going to exacerbate exclusion. We are going to see people dying of hunger. We are going to see children, the next generation of children, even the COVID babies being malnourished, and that is not good for the country.
Wow, interesting. Let me wait for Anna to log in because I have a question in regard to that, the issue to do with, because again, I'm seeing some of Parliament abdicating its responsibility here. If you approve money for programs, what is the role of Parliament to ensure that It's very, and it's good. It's good you are back because I had a question here that it spins off what Moses has just shared. When money is appropriated and approved by Parliament for government programs like this, the COVID relief money, what is the role of Parliament in this case to ensure that that money is actually it does the work for the intended purpose? Because there are fears already. We seem not to have addressed the shortfalls that affected the way we handled COVID during the first phase of lockdown. And here we are again, we are borrowing and also appropriating more resources, coming up with programs and interventions as if what happened, the way we handled the first phase of the money doesn't matter. So I understand that they have put in place, Parliament has instituted a committee to kind of like try to move out and audit and follow the money of COVID, but that might be post-mortem. Let's look at this current grant here, which you've just received. What's the role of Parliament to ensure that we do not have the same questions of where did this money go? Then secondly, there's an issue concerning participation and inclusion and the transparency and accountability. If I'm a person who is living in Masakacha Namkaka, for example, how do I get to know that this money has been borrowed and supposed to, if I am running an SME, I'm supposed to benefit? I'm supposed to benefit from all these interventions that government is putting in place that are as a result of money borrowed that I'm actually supposed to pay back as a citizen of Uganda. What is the role of Parliament in ensuring that people get this information, benefit this money, know where to go, and can also track this money?
Okay. So, Parliament's role, as you all know, is really oversight. It has an oversight function. So, what we will do is oversee the process and make sure that the money does what it should do. However, we even come from a point of disagreement. Some of us, I mean, come from a point of disagreement in how the list of beneficiaries has been arrived to, because we represent extremely rural communities, and we have seen those women that have been trying to do business in their markets. They have not been markets for months. There are no markets don't work. So what happens to those families? The woman who has a basin of cassava, which is supposed to take to Amuria market every week, has not been able to do that for how many months? And again, they've put her back into that. But remember, she is not part of the beneficiaries. I think 100,000 is not even sufficient to help people that have just come out of a lockdown and are going back to a lockdown. If you saw, I'm telling you, after this COVID period, the economists should go and do a research on the levels of poverty. You are going to be alarmed at how much poverty would have increased. And in some areas which are even disaster prone, just look at how much it's going to affect them. Because we are in the wake of a drought. A drought is coming. Famine is coming after this disaster of COVID. So it has really affected the livelihoods of every single Ugandan. I don't even know how these beneficiaries were arrived at. If government really wants to restitute these individuals and support them, then the list needs to be more comprehensive than this. But another thing is that the critical thing that my co-panelist noted is the total non-involvement of the LC1 structures. You see, I told you earlier that this government doesn't want to use systems in place. It has the LC1s. It has never used them. They're talking about VHTs, who they have never empowered. Not even skill or knowledge. VHTs are volunteers. It should actually be VVHT because they are volunteers of villages. No one cares about them. They are not at all catered for. So you have all these billions, we are borrowing, and Ministry of Health has never convened VHTs to speak to them, never convened VHTs to know the status of individuals in villages. How are you going to know that I saw orphaned children and vulnerable children on the list? How will you know these people if you're not in touch with the LC1 system? In a country like ours that doesn't even have a database about its citizens, Even the register of births and deaths is not as accurate as it should be. People don't have social security numbers. Other developed countries track individuals right from birth to death. So they will know which family is orphaned, which person is widowed, things like that. But this is not the case with Uganda. So this whole thing is only going to expose the fissures in the structure that we have in place, because actually there's no structure. It's something that is so haphazardly done and very difficult to understand. So now, even if Parliament goes to, we are basically going to do a post-mortem, as you said. Right now, Parliament is not sitting, as you know. Government is getting this money. They have on their own, the executive has on its own decided that these are the people who should benefit without consulting Parliament. Because we have other vulnerable people who are not on that list. So it's not comprehensive enough. So we're only going to have an opportunity to do a post-mortem after the damage has already been done to Ugandans. Because people are losing livelihoods. Poverty is increasing day by day. These SMEs, you talked about how people would know about the availability of funds. How do the people even get to know when even their representatives do not know?
Wait a minute, you are raising something interesting. You are saying even so when you say representatives don't know, you meaning their leaders, including MPs, don't know exactly.
Exactly. Right now, if Parliament was sitting, government would come and say, this is the amount going to be going into recovering, helping businesses recover. And then MPs would have to query.
Parliament is just playing catch up.
Yes, exactly. And so, we have new legislators who don't know how it may work. They may not even know how to access this information. So how will they relay it to the woman who has a kiosk in Chanamkak, as you said? How will they relay it to her?
That's a tragedy. Really.
One other thing that I am not so certain about, but has been stated is the way in which UDB disbursed the funding. When it comes to manufacturing what? Was it strictly items relating to COVID? Because some people, I must say, illegally benefited.
Yes.
From the money that UDB was disbursing to businesses. And it was, one time there was a list in papers, and, big people here and there were threatening to sue UDB over releasing the list, but they know exactly why.
That's a
so
very
even
good
this
point.
time, if really you're focusing on recovering of businesses, then the economists here will tell us the majority of businesses in our country, the kiosks, those very small enterprises whose data I think even government may not have, by the way, because the data in URSB is only for the the elite businesses which are recognized under the law, the partnerships, the companies, the cooperatives, but there are other businesses, and those are the most critical to our people, the ones I represent. I don't think they're going to recover.
Yeah,
because they've not been considered in what so far has come from government. Thank you so much.
You are right. Thank you so much. That's a very interesting. I'm going to give you your last word in the next couple of minutes. But before you give the last word, Moses, prepare to kind of make a comment on what Honorable has just said, because in your report you mentioned how the beneficiaries of the UDB money that were mainly agriculture and manufacturing enterprises were not necessarily affected by COVID, leaving out those that were affected by COVID. In the report, I want you to make a comment on that, because especially, and can you give us names of those, some of those that basically ideally wouldn't have benefited from this stimulus package, but either way, they received it, and to the anger of the many. And Honorable, as I give you the last word, I want you to comment, because there are people who whispered in my ear and told me, look, the president did mobilize us to contribute items in cash, items physical, that, and according to the report, were worth 23 billion. This is first. This is exclusive of the other money that was abused, that came in supplementary form and grants and donations. But there are these donations that were mobilized from the population. We also that fundraising drive. Have you tried to establish as Parliament where these materials went? I saw powder milk. I saw very many things that people were contributing. Where did these things go, including the money? Honorable, are you there? Honorable, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me? Sorry,
Yes,
my
Now,
mic.
yeah. Now,
Okay.
did you get my question?
Yes, I got it.
Good.
I did. So I think that what Parliament is going to do right now is to inquire into that, even the donations. The figure that I have is actually 29 billion in worth for donations, and we are going to inquire into that because no one knows what all these things did. I don't know. Maybe the cars were used for campaigns or something, but I know it must have also been siphoned out of the system. My own opinion about those donations, yes, there were some individuals that were well-meaning, but you know the patronage politics that NRM plays. Very soon, those other people are going to be asking for tax holidays. We know how this script reads and how it will roll out. So I think that government at that point should not have made it compulsory, or should not have literally forced people to do that, especially those companies, because I know very soon in the offing they're going to ask for tax holidays and say they were also affected by COVID when they were actually not. So it's a very crooked system, frankly speaking. I know that embassies donated. I know that companies donated. They donated gloves. But I really don't know where these things went. Because in Soroti Regional Referral Hospital, even gloves were impossible to find.
Yeah. Yeah, I seem to be losing Honorable, but I think Honorable, let me let you go. Thank you so much for really your contribution to this discussion, and I wish you luck as you try to follow where the money went, and I also wish you luck in your next term of office in Parliament. Be sure that I'm your big fan, and I'll still be engaging with you, and I can now let you go and attend to government.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Okay, now let me come to Moses because you're again wrapping up, and Moses will be having the last word as well. Moses, I had a comment, a question for you around the money concerning those people, the companies that ideally do not fall in the category of SMEs. Your report does highlight that. Did you go further to establish which these companies were and what was the criteria, and if we have this information, if I'm for example, if I'm a lawyer, I see a case here that I can pursue and get some money for government breaching contracts. So what's your comment on that?
Well, thank you, moderator. What I have to say is that UDB has not been transparent and accountable. I remember New Vision some time ago released a list of companies which had purportedly got money, yet they are not businesses that are SMEs one, but also businesses that had not been affected by COVID. The manufacturing kept on going even during the lockdown. But let me say this, when UDB came out to refute the list, which they refuted and they issued a press statement to that effect, they failed to bring their list of those who benefited. So we do not know who got the money because that information is with UDB. And UDB behaves as if it is a private entity. UDB should know that all the money that goes to its capitalization is taxpayers' money.
Yes, yes.
Now,
yes.
they are not transparent, they are not accountable, their interest rate is very high, they raise the bar very high that for us, if you are not capable of borrowing 100 million, you've seen this in their advert, their application procedure, you must be capable to borrow 100 million Uganda shillings. And for you to borrow that money, it means you must be having an asset 3 times maybe worth that. So you can see the league within which UDB is in. And this is a bank that you are telling to handle a stimulus package, if it was ever a stimulus package anyway. So that is the problem you have. I may not go ahead to mention these companies because these are companies that were published by the New Vision.
Okay.
But UDB refuted that information. But we are faulting UDB for failure to give us their genuine list. I do not know maybe whether
your report highlights one of the beneficiaries that has always been on the talk. As many people have been commenting on that beneficiary, also that is captured in your report, whether he does fit in the category of those that were supposed to benefit from the economic stimulus package. And for purposes of the viewers out there, I'm just reading what is in the report, and I also read it in the papers at that time. One of them is Kamwesi, which runs a hostel.
Hello.
Remember here you're talking
yes.
about
Can you hear me?
money being given to agricultural and manufacturing enterprises. So it means that there's some foul play here in the way these monies were appropriated to the targeted beneficiaries.
Now, for me, as far as the stimulus package is concerned, I'm sorry there was a problem with network. I did not hear the preceding question. We must get it clear. And I want to any minister of finance or any part of the disciples that we have now who may not even pass the biblical test, I want anyone to come out and say this much was a stimulus package that meant to support struggling businesses during the COVID, and here is the list, and this is the entity that dispersed that money. As far as we know, that list is not there. So it is not good for government to misrepresent itself when they talk about stimulus package. Nevertheless, we've not lost hope. We know the pandemic is still here. We want to recover better. We do want to see government walking the talk. Where is the money?
Okay.
Which entities? Are the packages designed to benefit the small and medium enterprises, the informal sector that has been hit hardest by the COVID? Government is capable of doing that, and we want to see, and we are calling upon these multilateral financial institutions that are giving a lot of money to government, the IMF, the World Bank, and even the African Development Bank, by the way. Reign over this. Let's have an honest conversation. Involve those who are affected. Let us design a system that will help Ugandans to recover better. That is what we are asking.
Okay, Moses, we're running out of time. I need to close this, and in a minute or two, so looking at what we have seen, how the first phase of COVID was handled and the monies that were used, how they were used, what going forward now, because we are in the second phase, and again we are borrowing more money to deal with COVID, the second wave, and also appropriating more money to deal with the second wave. So moving forward in a minute or two, what can government do differently? Remember, we still don't have that legal framework.
Yes, please. Well, what government, one is that we need to see Parliament acting very fast, debate the Auditor General's report, make recommendations maybe to IGG, but even IGG should not wait for Parliament. IGG has powers to investigate whatever matter. Even if they had it in the news,
yes,
they have to be proactive and investigate. But where is IGG in all this saga of misappropriation, of lack of accountability, of diversion? Where is IGG? They are sleeping. So we'd want to see government recovering lost monies, including criminally prosecuting those people who are involved. That is one. Secondly, we want to see government involving stakeholders, ordinary people, in terms of recovery, in terms of the COVID relief. The municipal and town clerks, for example, have said, for us, we have administrative data. And that data is, if it is there in the first place, it is years old, 1, 2, 3, 4 years. And that is the data we want to use to support the vulnerable who have been affected. Every day that goes by. And what is hurting, by the way, for the entire period we've done this research, about 6 months ago, we noticed that it's not about losing this money. Every money that is lost now means a life that is lost.
Yes.
It means people are not eating. It means these are rights of Ugandan citizens that are trampled upon. And that is the most hurting part. So we want to see government that is humane, government that is caring for its citizens, government that is transparent, but a government that prioritizes. We have enough money for oxygen if government had decided that. We have money to purchase the 42,000 ICU beds that the president wanted. We have money to improve our clinical capacity to handle all these cases. We'd also want to see government reigning over these private facilities that are extorting money from COVID patients.
Okay.
This is a pandemic. Government can use all government approach, including reigning over these hospitals. By the way, we can even take over these hospitals. We've seen in America when they had run out of oxygen, we saw how government reigned over manufacturing companies, and they devoted to producing the equipment that would enable people to survive. So government must take its central role, reign over these private profiteers who are extorting money from innocent citizens. We would want to see government that is engaging stakeholders. We would see government that is spending efficiently. When you look at the budget we have now, it's a budget where there is a lot of wasteful expenditure. So that budget should be surplused, should be prioritized, so that we can come out of this in a better way.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We bring this to a close. We've been discussing where did the COVID money go. I had earlier on with me, I had Honorable Anna Adeke, who is the district. She corrected me, district women representative for Soroti district. And we've been discussing from our perspective as a legislator who has been appropriating these resources. Is also now on the committee that is going to track, do more of a post-mortem process to see how the money was used. But I've also been having a discussion with Mushime Moses, who is a lawyer and economist, who they did publish a report where he was a lead researcher that looked at where did the COVID money go, basically looking at the international finance institutions that gave monies to Uganda to address the challenge of COVID. Yes, that is our money. It is important we interest ourselves to know where the money went, so that the next time we borrow, you know that you are part of the people who are going to pay back that money. Thus, it is important that you see this money put to good use. My name has been Felix Kafuma, moderating this session. I want to wish you a very good evening, a nice week ahead. Please practice the SOPs. COVID can still be handled if we do the 3 basic things. We mask up, we do social distancing, and we sanitize. We should be able to manage the situation. I wish you all the best. God bless. Bye-bye.
The monster of money politics is eating up Uganda's democracy. When you take money from a candidate, it means you are feeding the monster. Then you become a part of the problem. When a candidate who overspends on campaigns is elected, he or she will not represent voters but himself. He or she will engage in corruption to recover campaign money. social services will not be delivered and the voter will suffer more. Voter, let's be wise. Give democracy a chance. Do not sell your vote. Focus on the issue.